Adam.
No, I'm something I have sent for it. I ran into Lisa yesterday.
Okay, Nicole, ready to go? Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine at 5 o'clock on February 26, 2025 in the council chambers at the Municipal Administration Center. Roll call this evening, Deputy Mayor Clark,
Present.
Councillor Blackwell, Councillor Kavanaugh,
Present.
Councillor Hinchberger,
Present.
Councillor Pranger,
Present.
Councillor Steinoff Gray,
Present.
Councillor Stewart, Councillor Williams.
Present.
And I'd also like to acknowledge the staff and guests that we have in our public gallery this evening. Deputy Mayor, please.
We'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash, unceded First Nation, and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation, whose ancestors were the first to inhabit, care for, and live on this land. We recognize and deeply appreciate the contributions that Indigenous peoples have made, both in caring for this land and shaping and strengthening this community, our province, and our country. As a public service organization, we are dedicated to learning and acknowledging Indigenous history and culture and are committed to actions that move us towards a journey of truth, healing, and reconciliation with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, and the historic Saugeen Métis.
Are there any amendments, additions, or deletions to or from the agenda from council members this evening? Once again, I'd like to remind you to disclose any pecuniary interest now or as it arises in the meeting and the general nature thereof. So at this point, we need a mover and seconder that the minutes of the council meetings held on February 12th, 2025 be adopted as printed. Moved by councillors Clark, Deputy Mayor Clark and Kavanaugh. Any discussion? All in favor? Those are carried. All right, we move into a public meeting regarding the 921 Business Park Area Specific Development Charge Background Update. So we need a mover and seconder that the Council of the Municipality of Kincardine hold a public meeting in accordance with the Development Charges Act 1997 and its associated Ontario Regulation 8298. Moved by councillors Kavanaugh and Steinoff Gray. All in favor? And that's carried. All right. So at this point, I believe Adam is supposed to be here. Is Adam's here online? Okay, he cannot, so we'll move on to our manager of,
He's there.
he's there.
Connection issue. I'm consultant. Yeah, we might be able to.
Okay. So it is Hemson Consulting that's here this evening. Oh, here's Adam. Welcome back, sir. You're muted though. We can't hear you. I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is. Who's from the consulting?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. It's Jacqueline
Oh.
Hall from Hemson Consulting.
Jacqueline Hall. Okay, we can hear you wonderfully well. And I'm going to ask you to start the presentation, and when our director we get the tech issues figured out, then we'll come back. So if you would like to begin, Jacqueline, please carry on. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much for having me this evening. I do have a presentation with a few slides. I'm not sure if it's up on the screen or not, but if it helps, I could share my screen, or if there is a screen there, I'm happy to just speak to the presentation if it's already up.
Yeah, if you could share your screen.
Okay, perfect. Give me just 1 second to do that.
While Jacqueline's doing that, Adam, is there some preamble that you would like to present to us before Jacqueline begins hers? I'm not sure how we're going to do that. You're either going to have to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something to, I know, but we can see them.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now.
Okay. Other than that, Jacqueline, go ahead, please.
Okay, perfect. And I'm happy to do a bit of a preamble as well, if that would be helpful. So thank you so much for having me at council this evening. The purpose of this presentation and the public meeting this evening is to provide opportunity to make representation on the 2025 area-specific development charges background study, as well as the draft bylaw and the associated rates that our firm, Hemson Consulting, has prepared on behalf of the municipality of Clarington. The ASDC background study was made available publicly on the municipality's website on January 24th. And this public meeting is being held prior to the passage of the bylaw in accordance with the requirements of the Development Charges Act. And there was a formal notice provided in advance of this meeting. Just before I get into a little bit about what area-specific development charges are and why I'm here today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the presentation. I'll probably talk for about 10 minutes. I'll keep it fairly short and concise, but I just want to provide a little bit of background as to why we're doing this project and the process that is required as part of the Development Charges Act, which is the enabling legislation here in Ontario. There is a forecast that we have prepared in order to calculate these rates for the Highway 9 and Highway 21 lands. There is a capital program as well, so it's a summary of the projects that are needed in order to service future development in the area. I'll also talk about the calculated rates and how they compare to what the municipality currently levies, as there is currently a charge, an area-specific development charge for this area. I'll wrap up the presentation with just a bit of a high-level overview as to the applicable policies through the bylaw that will be applied to the area, and then just conclude with some next steps. So one of the reasons why we're here today is because the municipality would like to amend its current 2019 area-specific development charge bylaw related to Highway 9 and Highway 21 business park lands. This area-specific development charge bylaw was first done by our firm back in 2019, and it was intended to reflect that there are some very specific servicing costs for this area that are required in order to allow development to proceed. The municipality also has municipal-wide charges as well. These are for services such as fire, library, parks and recreation, But the area-specific development charges that we will be talking about, that I will be talking about during the presentation today and what's in the background study, is really about engineering infrastructure that only benefits the business park lands. And so recognizing that the infrastructure has a very small geographic benefit or servicing ability for development occurring in that area, that is why we're bringing forward an area-specific rate as opposed to a municipal-wide charge. It's also important to note that the municipality's existing bylaw is up for expiry. So at the end of March, it will expire. If we don't have a new bylaw in place before then the municipality cannot collect development charges in order to pay for that infrastructure. And essentially, if we don't use area-specific development charges to pay for the costs that have been incurred and that are expected to be incurred, that will then have to come out of other revenue sources such as property taxes or your utility rates. So just a little bit of background in terms of what development charges are and the legislative requirements. Development charges are imposed on future growth to pay for capital expenditures that are required to service that growth. The idea is that we're either maintaining service levels or meeting legislative standards. So water, wastewater infrastructure is a really good example of that. We have to provide water and sanitary infrastructure at a standard that meets the health and safety requirements of such pieces of legislation such as the Safe Drinking Water Act. The underlying principle of this tool is that growth is intended to pay for growth, because if we don't implement these charges, then the existing property tax base or the existing utility rate users have to then pay for that infrastructure, even if it's not required to service them. The requirements under the Development Charges Act have municipalities impose development charges through a bylaw. So there is one currently in place. So this is an update to that bylaw. Prior to passing an amendment or a new bylaw, we have to complete a background study as well as hold at least one public meeting, which is the meeting this evening. The bylaws are appealable to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and they are adjudicated before that tribunal as well. The schematic on the slide in front of you provides an overview of all the legislative requirements that we have to go through in order to calculate development charge rates. I won't spend too much time on this, but I'll just give a really high-level overview and relate it to the context in terms of what we've done for the municipality with respect to the Highway 9 and Highway 22 business park lands, is that we have to estimate the growth and development, so the amount, type, and location for the area that we're calculating the rates. We then have to identify the capital needs. So it has to be related to growth. We can't include or we can't ask growth to pay for infrastructure that will benefit or service existing residents. So if we're replacing a pipe with the same pipe that's already providing servicing to existing residents, we're not going to ask growth to pay for that. For certain services, we're limited to what we call a 15-year historic service level. In the business park lands, because we're looking at engineering infrastructure, we're not limited to that 15-year historic service level or that cap, recognizing that different pieces of legislation set standards at which we have to provide that service. So I give the example of the Safe Drinking Water Act. We are providing infrastructure to ensure that we're meeting those legislative requirements. Once we identify those needs and put together our capital program, we then have to make any sort of reductions for grants, contributions, if there's existing development in the area and they will receive a benefit from the infrastructure, then we have to account for that. If there's available DC reserve funds, we make that adjustment. And if there's any sort of shares of the project that will benefit growth occurring beyond the planning horizon, we take that into account as well. Once we make those adjustments, we arrive at our cost that's eligible for recovery. Those are the costs that are brought into our rate calculation. And then we allocate those costs between the residential sector on a per unit basis and non-residential sectors on a per square meter basis. We can also calculate a land area based charge, which is what we've done for the business park lands. It works quite well when we're using a small geographic area and we're introducing an area specific rate. But for those of you familiar with the municipal wide development charges, They are based on a residential rate per unit and a non-residential rate per square meter. You collect the same amount of money under both regimes. It just really depends on how we like to administer the bylaw and what the geographic area is that we're looking at to have those rates calculated. I apologize, as I believe this image might be a little pixelated in the presentation, but this is just an overview of the map that shows the benefiting lands that are subject to the area-specific development charge rate. A copy of this map is also available in the background study and also in the draft bylaw as well. So if anyone does have any questions or concerns about what areas are in or out, certainly this map can be referred to in order to make that determination. In terms of the development forecast, a forecast was prepared as part of this work, recognizing that we did originally calculate this rate in 2019. What we've done is effectively kept our assumptions the same, but have effectively netted out any lands that have been developed or paid area-specific development charges to date. So the total net developable lands, the lands that will actually pay an ASTC rate, is about 27.7 hectares of land. The capital program, if you look in the background study, there is an itemized list of projects. Just for the purposes of the presentation, we pull up a high-level summary. But essentially, what is included in this is the infrastructure needed to service the lands from 2025 to build out. So this is effectively once the full 28 hectares of the business park is developed, these are the costs that's associated with servicing those needs. So there's been about 4.5 million in expenses incurred by the municipality to date. This relates to roads and other engineering infrastructure work. There's a further 1.5 million that's anticipated to be spent. There are also debentures that have been issued for work to date. There's about $2.9 million in principal and interest costs. There's also some financing costs remaining on infrastructure that has yet to be debentured finance. And then what you see here, the adjustment for funding received for projects, accounts for the fact that some debt has already been issued for projects, and also that there has been some ASTC collections as well. So individuals have developed in the area, and therefore we take that into account in our calculation. So after we make all of those adjustments, it results in about $6.5 million of costs that need to be recovered for through the ASTC rate calculation. And how this works in really simple terms is that we take that 6.3 million, we divide it by the total amount of developable land, so the 27.65 hectares that I mentioned, and then that gives us a DC rate per net developable hectare of land. So it's about 236,000 per hectare, or about 95,600 per acre. So just to talk quickly about how that compares to the rate that's in force today, there was a rate that was calculated in 2019, as I mentioned. If we were to index that to current day dollars, an individual would be paying about 243,000 per hectare. We have calculated a rate at 236,000. So that's a difference of about $7,000, or a decrease in the rates of about 3%. Just quickly on the policies that have been brought forth in the draft ASTC bylaw, the Development Charges Act requires a number of statutory discounts and exemptions. So these are provided, are required statutorily. Even if they're not mentioned in bylaws currently, they are effectively law. So boards of education or local boards, an upper tier, for example, the county, we cannot ask them to pay development charges. There's rules around the intensification of existing and also new residential uses. So accessory residential units or secondary suites, those are effectively exempt. For an existing industrial uses, there's an exemption if the existing use is being expanded up to 50% of the existing gross floor area. We've seen a huge shift in recent years towards promoting and encouraging affordable housing and attainable housing. So in the Development Charges Act, it is now legislated that we provide exemptions for nonprofit housing. There's also discounts for rental housing based on number of bedrooms. And there are exemptions for affordable and attainable housing uses, but that is dictated through the Affordable Housing Bulletin. And there's very specific parameters about how we provide those exemptions and for what types of units. These will all apply to the business park lands, and effectively any other policies in the bylaw that we're bringing forward. So definitions, the timing and calculation of payment. There's no significant changes from the current ASDC bylaw. Really, all we're doing is just bringing that back in conformity with the legislation, because there has been a lot of changes over the past 5 years. And just my last slide, just to talk quickly about next steps. We released the background study at the end of January. We advertised for this meeting earlier this month. We're having our statutory public meeting today, so to allow members of the public and stakeholders to make delegations. Certainly, if there's any questions or comments that come out of the meeting tonight, we will work to respond to those and provide responses. With the idea being is that we're going to bring forward the ASDC bylaw for Council's consideration on March 26th. We will then prepare a notice of bylaw passage, and there is a 40-day appeal period with the Ontario Land Tribunal following that passage date. So with that being said, I will open it up to questions.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for that. Adam, are you able to comment? Do you want to comment? Still no, eh? Okay. All right. So are there any questions to clarify any of the information that we received from our consultant this evening? Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, page 8, it was sort of interesting. Page 8, you had one line that talked about adjustment for fundings received for projects, 2.86 million, I believe. What were the projects, or is this just the grant money that we're getting from the government? Maybe someone could, because I don't remember any big projects that we actually received any development funds.
Yes, through the chair, I'd be pleased to answer that question. So the 2.6 million in debentures that have been issued, that was done through a loan. So it wasn't through a grant process. So the municipality is required to pay back that money. And so, but we have accounted for any sort of principal payments that have been issued to date and remove that from the total project costs.
So there were no projects. There was the issuance of the debenture, which no, and I'm not the accountant here either, Councillor Stewart.
So that's the way they adjusted it.
Yeah, but it is through the debenturing process that was. We got that money whether we got it or not.
It's that Minister for Finance.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through your mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I think the origin of some of my questions and comments is going to be probably, I would think, a frustration shared on the part of the community, this council, and the previous councils over the lack of commercial development in those lands over the past 6 years. So I'm guessing, and you can help me a bit here, is that the philosophy, for instance, for exempting a board of education from it probably is this concept that building educational facilities are things that benefit the society at large. Would that be correct?
So through the chair, this has been a long-standing practice in the Development Charges Act to not impose development fees on boards of education or upper tier municipalities as well. So the idea being is that because those uses are public, they should not be charged development charges because it's not a private development. What we typically see is that the principle behind development charges, and there's some differing opinions on this, is that if a homeowner were to pay a development charge rate or a developer pays a development charge rate, that cost gets put on to the homeowner. So we don't see that same flow through with the Board of Education or school boards rather, which is what I understand to be one of the reasons why the Act is structured the way it is in order to provide exemptions for those uses.
So now I get into where it's just a comment. I'm having a hard time completely buying this notion that development over there won't benefit the community at large. And I'm just thinking out loud, not deciding out loud, thinking out loud. No, I'm not even going, it's not about the Board of Education. It's about generally, if the commercial development were to occur out there outside of the Board of Education, this idea that growth pays for growth, as if they're the only ones that are going to benefit from the growth out over there. And yet the development out there benefits the community as a whole. And what I'm not proposing, but where my line of thinking would go logically, is that some sharing of the costs for doing that amongst the whole population, because it does benefit the whole population. And the things I struggle with here is we say that, growth plays for growth, but we're not my opinion is we don't do that generally. Now, for instance, we can go into, I'll use Huron Ridge as an example, and spend millions of dollars in there upgrading water, wastewater, and roads, but we don't apply an area-specific levy for that. And there's a hard argument to make that expense didn't benefit just them, and yet the costs were shared across the whole community. And every time we do this, when we go into Tiverton or near to my neighborhood, when we're going to update municipal infrastructure with roads and sidewalks, those costs are getting borne across the entire tax base, and not the people who are generally, I think, are benefiting from them in a way that's more specific to them than this over here. So I realize what I'm saying, but there was a point in the report that says that I chuckled a bit. It says in part 1F of the background study, the growth and assessment with development will cover net operating and capital costs, but that's only going to be the case if it actually occurs.
Right on.
And here we're actually.
So thank you. We're wandering into a conversation, not inappropriate, but it's certainly outside. You're talking about the broader development charges.
No, I'm talking about this specific bylaw.
Okay, is there a question?
I just shared my thoughts, and I think I'll stop there. But it is about this bylaw. It's not about development charges in general. The philosophy might be general, but I'm talking about this specific bylaw and what it does.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. I was part of the council last term that when we did our first review in 2019, we were definitely hoping for development. And one of the things that didn't happen, development didn't happen. And unfortunately, my comment at the time is you don't speculate with taxpayers' dollars, and we did. And we now have it once again 5 years later to make a 10-year agreement, which is good. But we're going to be lucky to ever see any money coming from this. And again, we also penalize ourselves because now we have $95,000 or $96,000 on anyone who wants to buy an acre of property. So they'll buy it from Smart Center, and then we add $96,000 if they want to develop it. We're almost putting ourselves per acre right out of the commercial or the retail business in Bruce, because when we did a study, we were about $100,000 over cost of everyone else. So this is a very damaging, and I hope we've learned from this. And I hope that we move forward, like my fellow councilors saying, we got to be careful how we build infrastructure with taxpayers' dollars. We have to get the development ahead of schedule to pay for it. Thank you.
So if I might just balance that comment, I appreciate that. to have the developers pay for it, but that is the essence of this development charge bylaw, is so that the developers pay for the investment which they would have made, which we did for them anyway. Further questions? Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Through the chair, if I can just add, looking at the presentation, which was excellent, and I think it does a wonderful job of sort of outlining to the council and more importantly, the general public of what the situation is at the business park right now. One thing that you can take away from this is if you accept that the base level of growth should pay for growth, generally speaking, as is implemented through development charges, we're actually in a way incentivizing building here as opposed to other places, because this infrastructure was basically put in 2018 dollars, and you can see that manifesting in the one slide that showed that there's actually a 3% discount for a commercial industry to build there as opposed to somewhere else in the municipality, and the infrastructure is already in the ground. So if there was a positive way to look at this, yes, it's unfortunate growth hasn't occurred, but there's also a case to be made that there is a process there to encourage people to go where we want them.
So once again, the issue at hand here is to have the conversation about updating the bylaw that's already there. It is that is, that's the intent of the motion that's going to come forward. So just so we know, Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through your mayor. With respect, though, the Development Charges Act doesn't require municipalities to impose very specific development charges. It says it may. So this discussion about whether to or not and to what degree or not, I think is still within the scope of what we're talking about here. And then the other thing I would just like to say is, I don't like the management buzzwords, but the one that Councillor Steinhoff Gray and I might remember is what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing all over again and expecting a different result. So here we're presented with a update to the development charges bylaw, which has basically a marginal or almost very similar development charges it was before. And when I look at our situation that has developed over the last 6 years, I think it's a fair question to ask, what's going to change? That's just my perspective.
So it's just reminded by the clerk, this is the public part of the meeting where we have opportunity, as does the public, to ask any technical questions regarding. Got any questions? All right. So are there any other more technical questions? Director, you're online with us now? No, he's not. Didn't work. Okay, are there technical questions, Councillor Stewart?
Thank you. And through you, Chair, good presentation. We've been through this again, and I guess, are we going to do one at No Frills? I don't think we are anymore, but that cost us $500,000. One of the things on page 8, you had other engineering infrastructure, because what I understand right now is that we have services, I think, across the highway, but that's it. And they're truncated there. So how do you get this other engineering infrastructure at 1.56 million? What are the plans, or what are you projecting is going to go there?
Yes, through the chair. So the details on what's included in the other engineering infrastructure is in the background study under table 2. In there are cost estimates for a water booster pumping station. There's also the municipality's share of the MTO project for the design and construction of the Highway 21 at Russell Street intersection as well. So there are certainly costs that have been incurred, and there is infrastructure in the ground now in order to allow development to occur, but there are additional costs that are anticipated. And as part of this update, staff did work with an external consultant, BM Ross, to ensure that the costs were accurate that we're bringing forward as part of this update.
Adam, one more time.
Hi, Mayor Craig. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Your turn to talk.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Craig. Apologize for the technical issues here. So to Councillor Stewart's question, and to build off what Jacqueline's provided. So with the infrastructure that we have installed, there were a number of projects that were done. The initial project did bring the infrastructure just east of the highway. And then there was a subsequent contract that actually extended that work, and that's when we built out the Durham Street extension. So there is trunk mains all the way along what would be a Russell Street corridor that connects through Millennium Way and out Durham. And that's all there to support development of the parcels more on an individual basis. So as we see development proposals, they will provide engineering submissions, and then there will be subsequent construction methods and infrastructure installations that are required to support those more individual or focus-based developments.
Councillor Hinchberger, you had a question?
More just a comment about the report itself, or the draft bylaw. Like in section 10, services in lieu, there looks like there's been some edits and such where you have like subsections in there that are referring incorrectly to, you know what I mean? Like like for instance, in section 10, it has two subsections too, and the references are to section 11, but I think they should be to section 10. There's some, I think some edits in the bylaw that need to be cleaned up in terms of what references what. Thanks.
Jacqueline, please.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's a great comment, and we had actually flagged there was a few housekeeping items we want to deal with in the bylaw before it's brought forward to council approval. So that was one of them that we have identified as needing to be updated. There's also just a few other minor amendments that will happen to the timing of calculation and payment, just to ensure conformity with the new requirements under the Development Charges Act.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Just one last comment. I believe that the council has the right to waive these charges on any development in the future, whether we want to or not, but we do have the right.
Can you hold that till we get to the motion itself?
Okay.
An appropriate question, but this is the public meeting, and we'll get to it. We'll get to it. If there's no more technical questions from the council, is there any from the public that have been submitted, written in? Any questions about anything? Okay. All right then. So having completed the public meeting, we need a mover and seconder that the area specific development charge background study prepared by Hempson Consulting Limited and dated January 24, 2025 is hereby received, and council directs that the area-specific development charge background study and proposed bylaw be considered at the statutory public meeting convened in accordance with the requirements of subsection 12 of the Act on February 26, which is today. And the council considers a bylaw to establish development charges for the 9 and 21 business park lands at the March 26, 2025 council meeting. Moved by councillors Williams and Stewart. Councillor Stewart, please.
Just wanted to comment that we do, and in future, it has been done in the past, but you can waive these sort of area specific development charges as a council if we want to, but you can see there's a penalty and there's a cost. But if someone approached us, they could come and ask us for relief. Thank you.
Jacqueline, you just heard Councillor Stewart's comments. Can you confirm or clarify that position, please?
Yes, through you, Chair, and it's a important comment. There are restrictions on providing ad hoc waivers to development charges for one-off developments. There needs to be a policy in place. It cannot be done through the Development Charges Act or the bylaw. It can be done through a community improvement plan. So I just wanted to clarify that because there are a few steps. If council were to just waive a development charge for a particular application, it could be considered bonusing provision under the Municipal Act, which is prohibited. So there are just a few things that need to be worked through if it was an area that the municipality was exploring.
Those are the funds our Economic Development Department had put in the budget in previous years, like Spruce to Bruce, to be able to do that. Are there any further questions or comments regarding the motion that is on the floor at this point? Okay, all in favor of the motion? Any opposed? And that's carried. Very good. Moving on to staff reports. Bridge Master Plan. And once again, we have Director Weiser with us, and we have Alyssa Kochanski.
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. So we have a resolution here. We need a mover and seconder that council receives report operations 2025-06 and the Kincardine Bridge Master Plan final documents for information. And further, the council directs staff to consult with adjacent property owners and report details back to council to better inform council prior to making decisions on the structures considered. Moved by Councillor Prenger and second by Councillor Kavanagh. Oh my gosh, she's got a question already. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go to Director Weiser to lead us off on this discussion, please.
Thanks very much, and through you, Mayor Craig. So staff have been working with GEI Consultants over the course of the 2024 fiscal year. Within the capital budget, we did have a project to take a look at our structures as a whole to understand if there were opportunities for possible retirement or removal of structures from our network. As noted in the report, we do have 83 structures, which is a tremendous amount of structures to manage, not only from a maintenance perspective, but capitally and financially within that. So through that, myself and our manager of operations have worked closely with Alyssa and her team to evaluate our structures throughout our network to understand if there were opportunities that did exist. So through that, there has been, which is appended to the report, a report prepared by GEI that walks us through essentially the process and the methodology and how each of the structures that were included in the review, how they were assessed and benchmarked. Additional to that, it lays out how we broke down to essentially name a number of structures that would fit the criteria for the review, and then excluded a number of them that did not meet that criteria. So Alyssa does have a brief presentation here, which is an overview of things. So at this point, I'm going to pause and I'm going to turn the floor over to Alyssa for that presentation, and then we can follow that with any questions of council.
I'm just going to share my screen with the presentation. Can everyone see the presentation now? Perfect. So I'm just gonna, my name's Alyssa Kochanski. I'm with GEI Consulting, and I'm just gonna run through the Bridge Master Plan, just provide you with a brief overview. So just a quick agenda. We're gonna kind of go through an introduction, why we're doing this, what the kind of the purpose of the master plan is for, briefly discuss evaluation methodology, and then get into kind of the evaluation of the alternatives, and then the recommended strategy and kind of next steps that we're going to be taken. So really, this is kind of to review the objectives, the process, the strategy, and then kind of let everyone know what the conclusions of this report and the study were. So a brief introduction. So as previously mentioned, the municipality has a large number of structures. They have 83. So through OSIM report that was completed in 2023, I believe, which stands for Ontario Structure Inspection Manual, which are they're done every 2 years to kind of understand the condition of each bridge and then kind of make recommendations on the proposed maintenance. So if they should be repaired, if they should be replaced. So they have, this report has been completed kind of detailing all of your bridges statuses. So through that, basically, what we're looking at is that there's like quite a bit of your bridges are older. So like noting that the average age is 47 years old, indicating that there's a lot are kind of aging to the kind of 75-year service life, typical service life of a bridge. And then within that, further like to note that within those 83, 21 have an average daily traffic count of less than 50 trips per day, which is quite low. This is kind of like the minimum traffic that you would see along like a very rural road. So not much traffic is happening on a number of these bridges. So that's why we kind of taken an next approach to look at what we can retire. The next thing to note, I guess, is there are high costs associated with the recommendations produced from that OSIM report. So it noted that within the next 10 years, 31 bridges would need repair, totaling about $5.3 million, and 12 bridges would need replacing, like complete replacings that would total about $14.3 million. So like quite a significant capital investment. So what the master plan aimed to do was to identify structures that would be candidates for permanent retirement, such that we can avoid costly repairs and replacements that would be needed to kind of protect the capital investment, and then looking at maintaining an overall network conductivity. So you can see, I guess, in the map to the right, there are all your bridges are outlined kind of in pink dots. So brief overview of the methodology, how we got to our preferred program. So it was completed in kind of 2 steps to determine, I guess, a short-term and a long-term program. So this evaluation looked to either do nothing. So that would just be maintain your bridge, do the repairs recommended through the OSIMs, do the replacement recommended through the OSIMs, or have just a retirement of that bridge, a permanent retirement. So the first step of the process was a screening process. So this was more of a numerical based ranking system. So each bridge was kind of evaluated based off of a certain criteria, which I'll go into in the next slide. And then a threshold score was given, and of those bridges that met this threshold score, it was carried forward for more detailed analysis. So we evaluated, I guess, the short-term bridges, which are, I guess, less than 10 years. Those are bridges that were identified in the OSIM's report as having recommended works such as repair replacement, and then over 10 years would be just like bridges that are currently in good condition. There may be young bridges or they haven't had much deterioration, but in the future we can look to retire them as they've kind of slowly deteriorate. They slowly start to cost the municipality more money to keep up those repairs. So looking at those 2 different kind of criterias within. And then the step 2 is the detailed evaluation. So it's more of like a comprehensive review of each structure. So looking at potential impacts, opportunities, constraints, and then further looking at mitigation measures that can be applied to kind of mitigate those constraints. So the recommendations were based on kind of more of a reasoned argument approach, less than not so much the numerical version as in step one, but more of like reason argument as in like, does it make sense? And then we've had conversations with the municipality to kind of confirm that this is the right direction. So to detail kind of the evaluation criteria that we considered as part of this, we have for step one, I guess, we weighted each, we scored each criteria 1 to 5, and then totaling a final score out of 100. And then from that score, whatever met our threshold, so I think it was about 75 points, got carried forward for a more detailed evaluation. So for the short term, we looked at repair replacement costs, average daily traffic counts, and then at annual detour time. So what that looks like is a bridge with high costs would get ranked higher. A bridge with less traffic would rate higher. And I guess to further clarify for the annual detour time, basically that is the time you spend detouring to avoid that bridge closure. So the lower the detour time, the less inconvenient it is. So we're looking at a lower score, or a lower time would have a higher score. And then on the contrary, for the long-term evaluation, it also looks at detour time, traffic counts, and then current replacement value, which is just a standardized calculation for estimating how much a bridge is worth, and then the age of the bridge. So step 2 would be the detailed evaluation. And it looked at basically land use. So what land uses are kind of along that stretch of road where the bridge would be retired from. What would be the impact to key vehicles? So key vehicles would be like emergencies of police, fire, ambulance, as well as, I guess, winter maintenance, so snow plows, and then large farm equipment. And then considering everything as a whole, so what does that have? What does that look like as an overall impact to the transportation network as a whole? So using kind of that methodology and those criteria, we've developed kind of a long-term and a short-term strategy. So you can kind of see on the map on the right, so anything highlighted in red would be what was identified for closure, and then replacement is in orange, repair is in yellow, and then the rest are just green, so they would be maintained. So everything that would be recommended is basically in the rural area. There's nothing in the urban areas that is kind of on that list. So the short-term program for the next 10 years looks to retire 5 bridges. So they're kind of listed out here, and their associated costs as estimated by the OSIMS report. So you're looking at either the high costs to replace the bridge, or the kind of some of the lower costs to do those repairs. And then 28 bridges would still need to be repaired, and 11 would still need to be replaced, with the remaining 37 to just be maintained ongoing. In terms of long-term, so this is, I guess, when your bridge starts to deteriorate, when you're thinking about high costs to do those repairs, then you would start to do further consideration for these additional five bridges that were identified for retirement as well. So they're all just shown together in red. And I guess the cost kind of associated with those long-term bridges kind of ends up being about $2 million in current $25. So we also looked at kind of the overall criticality of the network, and based off of like their location, it was there would be limited disruption to the community. So what does that look like in terms of a short-term capital program and then overall cost savings? So even with those proposed retirements of bridges, there's still kind of like a high capital cost associated. But like by bringing that down by $5 million, essentially, in the short term, we're potentially saving the municipality a large chunk of money. So basically, I guess in the next 10 years, the municipality should look to spend about $1.5 million per year based off of the recommendations that have been previously made, but stands to save about $6 million in total by doing these retirements. And then kind of as the last step, so like the next steps and mitigation measures. So mitigation things to consider is to make sure that we're through these retirements that are being proposed, allowing appropriate turning radius for large vehicles such as snowplows and farm equipment, especially because all of these are in rural areas. Just notifying emergency services that these are closed, having appropriate signage posted, including updating load limits as necessary on detour routes. And then just kind of one thing to note about Bridge 2621, just doing an additional kind of environmental inventory as necessary. So some additional, I guess, next steps that would may need to occur include confirming that the bridges for retirement do not have any cultural heritage significance. Previously have not identified that they have, but there's kind of like a checklist that that can be followed to ensure that they don't. Public consultation, I think that it's in the municipality's best interest to notify the landowners in adjacent to these potential bridge closures, such that any additional like constraints can be identified. There may be like additional environmental assessment may be needed, and then kind of mitigation of environmental needs during kind of dismantling of the existing structures. So that's kind of the next steps of maybe additional investigations that need to occur. And that kind of ends my presentation. So I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you very much, Alyssa, for that presentation. Councillor Steinhoff-Gray, please.
No, I have a few questions, but I'm willing to share. Adam, through you, Chair, just for the director, one of the things I was a little bit concerned about when I looked at the Bridge Master Study, and it was really flagged by comments that had been made about Broadway needing to be replaced potentially within the next 10 to 15 years, when we were talking about the multi-use lane. That's kind of where my brain went. And when I look at the summary of costs, like if I look at all the work that we've assessed as repair work or replacement in the documentation is provided, we're looking at about 11 million for the next 1 to 5 years. And then when we look at the next 6 to 10 years, we're looking at about 8.3 million in repair work. And when I look at the BCI that's applied, so the Bridge Condition Index for the different bridges where replacement's been added, it has a score of 59 or below. And when I look at bridges that have had no works associated with them or replacement identified within the next 10-year plan, I have Broadway, which has a replacement value, CRV, of 4.9 million. I have the Adra Bridge, which is 450K, Saugeen Town Line, 275K, all with scores of 41, 37, 40. If I add up all of that work, and then when I looked at the cost of the replacement value versus what you were actually showing me in this report for costs, there was a differential of about 93.2, right? Like it cost quite a bit more in the cost provided versus what the CRV column had. So if I apply that average for all the bridges that we said we were going to repair and how much more it costs than the CRV, and I just ratio it based on the average, I'm looking at potentially $16 million in year 15, right? Like once we get into that next cap, which is technically more than I've spent in the last 10 years. So I kind of wanted to understand that because for me, it looks like we have a balloon coming and maybe we should be moving some of that work forward to like spread it out.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Craig, a couple things. One, I mean, the intent of this review isn't necessarily to hone in on what's needed that's identified typically through our biannual OSIM inspections. Through that, with BM Ross, we identify what's needed on both an annual basis, a 1 to 5 and a 5 to 10 year consideration, both for we'll call it smaller maintenance items as well as large capital. So when I say large capital, I really am referring to replacement. And so through that, our 10-year plan does have any of the structures that correspond to the OSIM inspections that we've been doing identified within them. And I completely agree with you. There is a significant amount of work and a significant amount of dollars that needs to be spent. One of the reasons that we really initiated this review is that we felt that there were a handful of structures that had substantial enough cost associated with them that we felt didn't necessarily align with the warrants or merit for replacement considerations when we're trying to balance all of our assets and finances. So I know that doesn't directly give you an answer to your question, but we really didn't focus on, you know, what is the 5-year plan, what is the 10-year plan, how are we going to fund all of the things that actually are going to need to be maintained and replaced. It was really focused on, do we have opportunity for possible retirement of structures? And if we do, and if council is open and supportive of that initiative, then we would pursue that further by probably the initial step being consultation with people that are going to be most directly impacted.
Follow up, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I understand that, Adam. It's just, I have obviously struggled with a few of the bridges that we plan on spending on. Just because of how high the price point is. We've had these conversations. And so like, for me, I don't want to inadvertently spend and find out that I'm going to have harder decisions later. Broadway scared me. It's a very big bridge and it's coming up in my mind because it's sitting with a score of 41. So like, we know that it's not in perfect condition. So for me, with how much we hit our tax base, and we're obviously conservatively putting 3% aside, but if we have a balloon, that 3%, I'm having a hard time feeling comfortable that our asset management, what we're putting aside and knowing what the real spends are. To your point, if we retire some of these structures, we can adjust that asset management plan. But I want to have a good feeling that we have line of sight beyond the next 10 years, because some of these things will be quick on the heels of that 10-year period, and I might not be here to pay the consequence of it, but I'd like to be sure that we're thinking about it.
Yep, you left it.
No, he's still on the phone. You just can't see it.
Adam, was there a response for that concern expressed or just acknowledgement?
So through you, Mayor Craig, just acknowledgement. And for your awareness, my camera just decided to stop working as well. So I am still here though.
Councillor Stewart, you had a question, please?
Yes, thank you very much. I was looking at the charts under the report, and we just approved a bridge 2121. And I'm looking at the traffic counts on page 12, and Jacqueline, maybe you can help me. 2121 shows less than 50. Is that per day?
This is Alyssa. Jacqueline was the last.
Sorry.
Was the last presenter.
Sorry, I didn't know. Oh, good. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, we just approved a bridge 2121 for replacement, and we were informed that the traffic count was a lot higher than what you have on your chart 12. And I'm just trying to understand that, because it looks like this bridge would have less than 50 people going across, vehicles per day.
Through you, Mayor Craig, I'm going to jump in, Alyssa, and take this one. So within the report and the report that was provided during budget deliberations, as well as indicated to staff at the January 13th budget meeting, the annual average daily traffic volume is between 200 and 499. That has been consistently shared with council from staff. So it isn't 50, it isn't less, and there hasn't been an anomaly. It's been a consistent data set that's been shared.
I'm a little bit confused then, because you just did a traffic count 2003, 2004. So we'll take this offline, but it's a concern of mine, because if you're really telling us it's less than 50, we'd probably retire this bridge. But anyways, another thing I wanted to follow up on, because I think this is a great idea. And I know there's a bridge over in Elma 2602. And I'd like to know what our intentions are if we decide to retire bridges. What's the process around it? Like, I'm thinking that if we're planning to retire bridges over the next 5 years, we put a sign up there immediately saying we're planning to retire this bridge over 5 years. Instead of just telling people, you know, adjacent owners, they need to be informed about this. We need to set a process in place that everyone understands. So when we decide that we're going to retire a bridge, there's enough time for people to understand it and people to feed back to us. Because our council terms are 4 years, but a lot of these bridges will be around for 5 years. So I'm not sure what department, it's probably not your department, but it's got to be somebody in the staff to set up a process so we can do this fairly with the residents and everything else, because some of these bridges probably can be retired. And second question is, once we retire the bridge, what is our obligation on that bridge? Do we have to dismantle it? Or do we just leave it closed?
Director, please.
Thanks, and through you, Mayor Craig. Certainly align with your comments, Councillor Stewart, around the consultation piece and the notice, and the impact being broader than just, you know, those that we may deem that are directly adjacent to. And so that would be something we would have to work with, whether that's through GEI, municipal staff, or other consultants or firms that, you know, that have worked through bridge closures. It's certainly something we've had some vague or brief discussion on through this process. The balance of your question about what do we do after retirement? Do we maintain the structure? Do we have obligations? So with any assets, we do have an obligation to make sure something is in a safe state. And so, you know, with that in mind, if we were going to consider retirement of these, it would be our opinion, at least from staff and some discussion that Corey and I have had, that we should strongly look, you know, at what is the impact of removal in that retirement process of these structures. So what is the financial impact of that, as opposed to just leaving something, because we really can't just leave it and turn a blind eye. We still have obligation to make sure it's safe to the public if it's there.
Councillor Stanoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through your chair. Actually, one of the questions I would ask is, my understanding is Saugeen Shores recently closed some bridges, and my understanding is that they didn't close them right away. They actually closed them for like a 1-year period just to assess what the impact actually would be. And after that point, they made decisions. And I believe one was brought back that would have otherwise, it was resurrected, that would have otherwise been retired. So I would hope that if we do move forward with retirements, that we build in a plan that the bridge is still structurally sound enough that we could replace or repair after doing a trial closure, just to see and assess the true impact.
So as with any report that we receive, council always has the option to choose a path that isn't the one most highly recommended in the report. We always have that option. And when a budget item comes forward, it says, you know, we need to spend this much to close it, and council says, no, we're going to spend this much to fix it. There's always options. So the resolution is that we receive the report for information, and you know, as part of that conversation, I'm sure that the director will be back to indicate any recommended closures and the communication strategy with any adjacent nearby landowners. So Are there further questions from council regarding this? Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. It's just a quick one. When I was looking at the Appendix A, there was some missing dates for the year built. And then when I was looking at the data you provided based on the bridges recommended for repair over the next 10 years and replacement, I noticed that in that chart, there actually were install dates. And then sometimes there was misalignment between the install dates in Appendix A and those that were referenced. So like there's a couple ones, like if you look at concession 9, side road 15, McTier Bridge, on Appendix A, I have 1961, and then in whichever tab it happened to be where the repair or the replacement was, it shows 1945. Like there was definitely some deltas between those dates, and then gaps where there was no date provided in Appendix A where dates were inserted. So I wouldn't mind, you don't have to answer it now, take it back, but I'm curious what the differential is between the two. Because if it's a component or what have you, I really didn't have that line of view. So I would just ask for some clarifications there where it's not quite lining up.
Deputy Mayor, you have a question, please?
I think it's more of a comment, Mayor, through you. You had stated that this was really for us to receive, but there is direction that the staff is looking for. So I think we need to address it if we are considering closing. Staff are looking at direction to consult the adjacent properties. So I think there is just, we'll need to give that direction to staff if that's what we're looking at doing.
Yeah, well, maybe we can confirm with our director. It says, further, the council directs staff to consult with adjacent property owners and report details back to council to better inform council prior to making decisions on the structures considered. So I can please confirm, Director, prior to any closures, would you be back to report to council that this is the plan for this particular bridge, this is the process forward?
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Craig, the way we've laid out the recommendation or the motion is first and foremost, it's information that's been put together in a report, and we want council to receive it before council and even really staff can make further formal recommendations for council to consider. We feel talking to the community is a vital component, and that wasn't part of the the technical analysis. So we would like to understand if council at least is interested in exploring this further. And if they are, we would start a consultation process and then come back to council with findings from that and further recommendations around considerations of any of these structures that have been identified.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart, please.
Sorry, and through you, Chair, just to clarify, would you be giving us the information on what bridge you're planning to close in, 2 years, 3 years? I didn't quite get that.
Yeah, so through you, Mayor Craig, right now, I would look at it that any of the structures that have been identified in the short and long term that have been noted for possible retirement, and so that's either retire now or retire after a form of rehabilitation that's listed, they are ones that have been identified that they could be retired at some point within their lifespan that's left. So we haven't identified whether that's 1 year, 2 years, 5 or 10 years out, but just simply that they meet the criteria for retirement considerations. And so we would like to explore all of those as a whole for additional consideration, come back to council with that list, and then from that we would identify bridge 1, 2, 3, may have a recommendation, 4, 5, 6 could be something different, etc. But we would do that at a later date once we've done some consultation and further review.
And I expect there would be a proposed time frame within that report as well, Director.
Through you, Mayor Craig, yes, that's correct. We would include a timeline within that.
Councillor Prenger, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I do feel like that consultation for the people adjacent to these bridges that we're proposing to potentially retire is very important. And I was happy to see the motion worded the way it is and that staff as was proposing to do that without even being asked to. They came up with that, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to put this motion or to move this motion. Is that right? Sorry, support it. So I think it's vital to the process that we get input. The adjacent owners and users are going to have insights that we won't have. They're going to have experiences we don't have. So even consider retiring something, I would want personally to hear their voice.
Councillor Steinhoff, Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. This is a two-parter. I'm just curious, because I know this report was probably put together before what I'm going to refer to as Snowmageddon. But when we're thinking about what bridges we might be closing, I think we were forced to use some alternative routes that we've never had to use quite so frequently with the extended closure of 21. And I don't think that's something we would normally take into account. I definitely did not anticipate what this winter brought. It reminds me of winters of my childhood, not to date myself. So I was just curious if there was, I noticed that you had a few comments against the bridges based on alternative use cases. And I don't think that any that we're suggesting for retirement are, but I would be curious if there's any works that we have to do based on that, because I wouldn't have considered 21 as needing an alternative until this year.
So through you, Mayor Craig, within the review, we certainly did look at the impact of closure of a corridor and, where was the next adjacent corridor that could be utilized. Something that we can take back from this, though, is certainly the impact of this winter on 21. And if we were closing the most adjacent side road, a couple sections of that, what are the alternatives? And what does that do to the road network and detour aspect? And does that change the scoring and stuff like that? So it's something we didn't necessarily do because this report was essentially, even though the date is finalized here in the new year and we have had weather events, a lot of the legwork went into it up to and kind of right around the Christmas season and holiday break.
Thanks for that, Adam. And then my only final question, and it's not important, you can get back to me later, but I would be curious how the CRV was calculated, like if it was from prices in 2022 or 2023, just because I've noticed that those prices weren't lining up with the actual costs that we were seeing. So I wouldn't mind a little bit of understanding of when that was calculated, because I'm not going to complain about a number if the formula that was used is obvious. You know what I mean? I just don't know what I don't know. So it would help me understand, if you could help me understand that calculation, it would help me understand the difference between the CRV that was listed versus the cost that was indicated in the report for the replacements that have already been identified. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those questions. So we have a motion on the floor. The council receives the report for information, and further, the council directs staff to consult with adjacent property owners and report details back to council to better inform council prior to making decisions on the structures considered. All in favor? And that is carried. Right, we move on to expansion of the Tiverton water supply system. We have once again our directors here, along with Andrew Garland and Lisa Courtney from BM Ross. And I need a mover and seconder. The council directs staff to issue the notice of expansion of the Tiverton water supply system municipal class environmental assessment, environmental study report for public review. Moved by Councillor Steinhoff Gray and Councillor Prenger. And we welcome Andrew and Lisa. Welcome back.
Member Craig and members of council for having us. I'm the Andrew half of that, and this is Lisa with me here. We do have a presentation to go along with this tonight, but maybe just start.
Yep, so our clerk's just getting that up on the screen.
Okay, thank you. So we're here to talk about the municipal class environmental assessment process, looking at expansion of the Tiverton water system supply. If we can go to the next slide, the agenda includes an overview of the project background, the issues considered, an overview of the Class EA process, an overview of the preferred solution, and next steps should the municipality choose to proceed. The Tiverton drinking water system, just a little background. It operates under 3 related approval documents: the Drinking Water Works Permit, the Municipal Drinking Water License, and a permit to take water. All 3 documents are issued by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, or MECP, and they describe the general infrastructure, your operating and compliance requirements, and the capacity of the system. The system has 3 wells, constructed in 1971, 2003, and 2006. 2 of those wells, including the older 1971 well, are at the Briar Hill well site, and 1 well is at the Dent well site. There are nearly 400 service connections as of year-end 2021. And in terms of capacity, the key thing to note from this slide would be that the permit to take water limits the daily takings to 775 cubic meters. Next slide has a map that'd be pretty difficult to see. It's just an overview of your water distribution system. The Briar Hill site is towards the north end of the community on Conquergood. The Dent well is on Smith Avenue towards the kind of central part of the system. And the standpipe, your storage facility, is towards the east end of the system. So how do we get working on this project? Well, in 2023, the municipality had a water and wastewater servicing master plan update completed. And specific to the Tiverton water system, some of the key findings were that maximum water demand per day was about 616 cubic meters. Commitments for future development included 256 what we call equivalent residential units. And really, that's just the way that we look at the servicing requirement associated with a single detached residential unit. And then we scale that for apartments or multis, that kind of development. But one ERU would be 1 single detached residence. And those 256 ERUs represented a potential water demand of 424 cubic meters per day. So combining your existing customer usage and those ERU commitments, the total committed servicing value of 1,040 cubic meters per day exceeds the permit to take water limitation of 775. Now, in our opinion, it's important to consider that commitments for proposed construction don't become real customers immediately. Therefore, at the time, there was no real immediate physical improvements required. On the flip side, the suggestion was that given those are commitments and there's a potential for more development interest, it was prudent to start looking at least the planning process of how to ensure servicing capacity was in place once those commitments were actually constructed. And that's what the master plan recommended and why we were working on the EA. In addition to the supply capacity issue, just some additional comments, other issues considered as part of this process. The 1971 Briar Hill well has a deteriorating well casing and is becoming due for replacement. In addition to that, the actual pump house and treatment building there and some of the electrical and mechanical equipment in that building are becoming due for replacement. And that's just a note that's factored in when considering kind of overall capital costs of different options here. On the basis of those considerations alone for the well and that building, there'd be a need for some significant capital works in the upcoming years to maintain the existing system capacity. With respect to water quality in your system, the graph here just shows for the last 10 years water quality at Dent specific to 3 parameters. Arsenic, that's the blue line. Under the current regulation in the province, arsenic has a maximum acceptable concentration of 10 micrograms per liter. And when values reach half that value, so 5 micrograms per liter, there's an increased requirement for increased sampling frequency. And that's the situation that you have right now with the Dent well. In that 10 years, values have ranged from a little over 4 micrograms per liter to about 6.5. So still under the regulatory limit, but above that half MAC that requires the additional sampling. The green line represents fluoride. That holds fairly consistently just above 2 milligrams per liter. 1.5 milligrams per liter is the Ontario Drinking Water Standard maximum. I would suggest it's not uncommon for groundwater supplies in the area to have that kind of result. And the third parameter of interest there on the orange line, sodium. It looks like more variation than perhaps it really is. The values range from about 39 to 43 milligrams per liter. And the Safe Drinking Water Act requires that the medical officer of health be notified when concentrations are above 20 milligrams per liter. Again, I'd suggest there's nothing too uncommon about having values above 20 in groundwater supplies in this area. So to summarize the current issues being considered as part of the EA process, the system's overcommitted and lacks adequate reserve capacity to supply potential development considered. Population growth will lead to increased demands on the water system, and the condition of the existing Briar Hill 1971 well, as well as the building and some of the mechanical and electrical treatment works there are aging and near the end of useful life, requiring replacement. So to address these items, the municipality initiated a Class EA process, and with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Andrew. So I'm just going to briefly go over the municipal class environmental assessment process. So this is the process that municipalities have to follow when they're looking at improvements or changes to their road, water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure. And the easy answer to why you have to do a municipal class environmental assessment is that under the Environmental Assessment Act, you are required. So that's, one easy answer. The better answer is that it is a process that allows municipalities to incorporate consultation and the consideration of impacts and potential alternatives before a decision is made to implement a certain method or way of doing infrastructure. So the first phase of the Class EA process is defining the problem or opportunity that's to be addressed. So this problem or opportunity statement is really the framework we use to evaluate alternative solutions. So our problem and opportunity statement essentially comes from the master plan. So the master plan identified that the Tiverton drinking water system is overcommitted and that additional supply capacity is required to support future growth. The second phase of the EA process is then looking at what alternatives there are to solve or address that problem or opportunity statement. So this slide summarizes essentially what is our kitchen sink of potential options for addressing the problem or opportunity statement. So the way we approach this is we look at all the options and then really drill down to what's practical and feasible. So the first alternative we looked at is expanding the existing or constructing new groundwater well system. The second alternative would be to construct a connection to the Kincardine drinking water system via booster pumping station at Inverhuron. The third would be to reduce demand for water or limit community growth. And then the fourth option is the do nothing or status quo option. And this alternative is always considered through the EA process, even if it doesn't address the problem, because it gives us a benchmark to compare against, and it can be implemented if the other alternatives can't be implemented. So alternative one, as I said, was expanding the existing or a combination of constructing new groundwater supply system. So to look at this option, we had Jeff Rather from Ian Wilson and Associates complete a desktop review of the hydrogeological conditions in and around the Tiverton area. So that included a review of the existing wells and some of the existing well records from that neck of the woods. And from his review, we know that the ability to use or expand the existing wells in Tiverton is probably limited. So we're not likely to be able to re-rate those wells to get a higher amount of water out of them. And then that plays into with some of the concerns that Andrew brought forward earlier with the condition of the Briar Hill well casing and the existing well house equipment there. In terms of constructing new wells, we expect we'll probably find similar well quality when we go out drilling. So mineralized water with probably elevated total dissolved solids, sulfate, iron, and sodium. We may also get into arsenic and fluoride. From Jeff's assessment, we know that we have about a 50% chance of getting the yield we need from any well that's drilled in that area, and that we know we have to space wells apart fairly significantly in that area so that we don't have interference between the wells. So a minimum of 350 meters from a domestic well and probably closer to 700 meters from the existing wells is going to be required. And when we look at this option, we know we're probably going to have to at least maintain and rehabilitate the existing wells and add new wells to get the amount of water that's needed. So when I was talking about the distance we need between the wells, this is just a quick figure to kind of give you an overview of what those distances look like. So we have the existing 2 wells, and then I pulled some records, just a few, just for an example to show what 350 meters looks like. So from this figure, you can see that it's not likely we'll be able to site another well within Tiverton itself. And so consideration when we're thinking about this option is that we'll have to probably expand the distribution system to somewhere outside the current boundary to connect it into the system. So when we talk about this option in terms of costs, we know we're likely going to have to reconstruct the Briar Hill well in terms of the well itself, as well as the treatment and electrical building. We estimate the cost for this to be in the range of $3.6 million. Then on top of that, we know we probably are looking at least 1 additional well, probably 2, and that is likely also going to cost at least $3.6 million. Costs will vary depending on siting, how much water main is required to connect to the system, depending on where the wells are sited. The second alternative is to construct a connection to the Kincardine drinking water system from Inverhuron. So this would involve constructing a booster pumping station somewhere in Inverhuron and then running a water main along Bruce Road 15. So the logical site for the construction of a booster pumping station is at McIntyre Park. So this is at the corner of Bruce Road 15 and Albert Road. So you can see it. I've got a little picture of what it looks like as of last year. So there's not a lot there at the site. There is a playground, small playground, but it's mostly kind of wide open parkland with some trees. So in terms of what a booster pumping station might look like at this site, we've just drawn up some quick kind of conceptual plans. If you go to the next slide, please. So this slide shows the booster pumping station outlined in red. There's a generator associated with the station that would be used for emergency purposes to keep the water running when the hydro goes out. You can see in this example, we've got it pushed against the western boundary of the park. This is getting into the treat area. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see what it would look like if we pushed it a little further east to keep it out of the trees. But you can see it's generally not taking up a very large portion of the park. And then, as I said, associated with that option, we're looking at a 3.5 kilometer water main from the booster pumping station to where it would connect into Tiverton. And I'll turn it over to Andrew.
So when looking at potential impacts associated with a project under the EEA, there's really 5 categories that we look at: natural environment, social environment, cultural, economic, and technical environments. And there's a fair bit of text here. I won't go into it all, but specific to the alternative of looking at the booster pumping station with respect to natural environment, probably some of the more significant notes would be the probable need to clear at least some vegetation from the site. Therefore, the layout should consider ways to minimize that impact. Potential positive benefit would be decommissioning the existing wells that are in Tiverton right now, eliminating potential pathways to the aquifer there. In terms of social impacts, again, there's a loss of a portion of the park site. Most other impacts, such as noise, traffic, would really be limited to the construction period and probably not noticeable once the station's in operation. Benefits in the social criteria would include support of future growth for Tiverton and eliminating source water protection areas around the existing wells in Tiverton. With respect to economics, there's no question there's a significant capital cost associated with constructing the booster station and the water main, though we do anticipate that long-term, both capital as well as O&M costs for that option would be less than on the basis of continuing a groundwater-based supply, especially if we're looking at adding, 1 or 2 potential additional well sites to get that long-term target supply capacity. With respect to technical, the main benefits would be supportive growth, simplification of your treatment processes, and moving to a single municipal drinking water system rather than the 2 that you have right now. Probable costs for this alternative, I guess before we get talking about them, 2 comments I'd make. These are based on 2024 construction dollars for the kind of best comparable projects that we've seen in the area. The other comment I'd make would be that a fairly frequent question we're getting in recent weeks from different clients is all around the issue of the nasty word tariff and whether that'll have impacts here. And to be blunt, I wouldn't pretend to know what those impacts may or may not be. It's just a note that these costs wouldn't have any adjustments based on what may or may not come to pass in that regard. So based on the 2024 information for a booster station of that size, in the neighborhood of 2.2 million, the trunk water main to get from Inverhuron to the west end of Tiverton, 2.6 million, and then budgeting a little over 600,000 for all of the design approvals, contract in, would put the total project cost at about 5.4 million plus HST. There'd be some additional costs, probably in the order of a couple of tens of thousands of dollars associated with decommissioning existing wells and well houses. And the final note on cost to be that a portion of those costs would be attributable to future growth and could be recovered through DCs based on the current demands and what the target design capacity would be for the system, about a 50-50 split between existing and future. As Lisa mentioned, alternative 4, which is the do nothing or status quo alternative that's always carried forward. Just some notes there. It would not address, obviously, the need for additional supply capacity to meet future development commitments. And just a reminder that there'd still be the need to maintain and do some rehabilitation for existing infrastructure at the Briar Hill site. However, again, this is always considered in the process. So some of the key notes regarding the different alternatives. So alternative 1, expansion of the wells or adding new wells. It does make use of existing infrastructure. And with respect to economics, probably the greatest potential benefit would be that, again, looking ahead to the long-term capacity requirements, you wouldn't go out and put 2 brand new additional well sites in on day 1. You'd have the opportunity to defer some costs, add 1 now, and then if growth materializes, look at adding that second one in the future. The disadvantages with that option, again, that potential need for 2 new well sites in addition to what you already have can make for some fairly high long-term capital and O&M costs. You have that ongoing need to maintain and rehabilitate what's already there. And so we think the overall costs for that option, both, considering initial and long-term, are going to be greater than alternative two, to construct the booster station and connect to the Kincardine drinking water system. With that, I'll pass it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Andrew. So as part of the EA process, there is a public consultation component, and we did have a public information center held back on October 30th. This past year, we had approximately 15 folks show up between the two different sessions held in the afternoon and in the evening. And then we also made the presentation that we had done at the public meeting available on the municipality's website. We did a narrated version, and people could then watch it at their leisure later if they so desired. We didn't receive any comments from the public following the meeting, but we did get a few during the meeting. And I've just summarized kind of a few of them here on this table relating to is there capacity available at the Kincardine plant? What will the financial impacts be? Will this fix local pressure issues? Was there, should we be concerned about the water quality? And we were able to address that, it's all still within the standards and is very safe. What are the long-term impacts financially? And how do we minimize impacts to the park? And then a note as well from the group that is working at developing that park, just, hello, we've got some plans and we're like to keep in touch. And so far that has been the case between us, staff, and that group as well. So in terms of next steps for the EA process, we're looking for direction to proceed with the preferred alternative in the draft screening report as presented. So that's the booster pumping station and the connection to the Kincardine drinking water system. We then would give that draft report to agencies, the Ministry of Environment, to review. Once that review happens, we'd address any of their comments, and then the screening report goes out for the public to provide comment on. There's a 30-day public comment period. Once we address any issues that are raised during that 30-day review period, the EA is then considered complete. An EA is good for 10 years, so the municipality can then choose to proceed with the project or plan and proceed with it at a little later date if that's what they decide. After, once they decide, you get into the design phase, and that's where you would look at specifics like exactly where the booster pumping station is going to go in the park, what the station looks like, apply for approvals, and then proceed with construction. So we'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
So thank you, Andrew and Lisa. Just to confirm, and it's about the next steps. Is the conversation that you're asking us to have tonight to confirm the preferred option, or is it to say, yeah, proceed with that, but it's still on a conceptual sort of basis because we have not, there'll be all sorts of comments about where the line goes, where the station goes, and all sorts of things. Can you inform us about the extent of the decision that we are making tonight, please?
Sure. So this is the decision we're asking you, or the direction we're asking for, is to proceed with the preferred solution, which is connecting to the Kincardine drinking water station and putting a booster pumping station in Inverhuron at the park. Details about specifics, like what the site will look like, they come later during the design phase.
Question, please. Councillor Steinhoff-Gray.
Do them one at a time. Thank you, through you, Chair. I guess my question, I'm not sure who's going to necessarily answer it. I think I'm going to just start off with a comment. Obviously, I'm the councillor for Ward 3, and Tiverton is dramatically influenced by this. And acknowledging that the constituents have brought concerns forward with development, and we are now saying we're at overcapacity when they had concerns about that. And that's part of what's driving this, is the fact that by 2029, on a high population growth, we could be under capacity. I want to acknowledge that, because for me to endorse one way or the other, I see the practicality of hooking up to the Kincardine water system, but the price differential is very different. And we have been unsuccessful in 2 grant attempts with the province to deal with this. And I would like to understand how that cost gets forecasted, because my understanding is that it could be on the individuals that have the tangible hookup fee. So they've already paid for the infrastructure they're on in Tiverton. And I would like to know how that cost model works, because it's a big difference in price between the two. And at this point, that would inform some of my decision above and beyond just practicality.
No, there was a question there that needs to be answered, so.
I was just waiting to see if Adam was gonna.
Adam, did you want to comment on that, or is it, are you still with us? Director,
Yes,
please.
I'm still here, Mayor Craig. Yeah, I'm still here, Mayor Craig. And Lisa or Andrew, certainly jump in behind me if there's a need. So yeah, certainly understand like with what's presented tonight, and that there's a number of logistics that need to be sorted out in terms of which is, ultimately which is the source, which is really why we're here, which is the preferred source of water supply to the community going forward. From there, we then dive in deeper and really figure out what is the true cost. How do we break that down on a per capita basis or a beneficiary basis? We have, as Councillor Steinhoff-Gray noted, been unsuccessful on two grant opportunities through a recent program. While we still, look at this as an opportunity for, alignment with the provincial goals or vision in terms of increasing housing supply, it was unsuccessful in those attempts. So at this point, we really, in my mind, need to figure out, is it source A or source B that we're going to correct or address, the components of what we're really looking to set out to do. One of them is capacity for future growth. One of them is really constraints within the existing supply network that's there. While what we have is producing and providing safe, potable drinking water to the community, we are getting to the point where we're near the end of useful life for the existing well systems. So I don't know if that fully answered things. And again, Lisa and Andrew, jump in if I didn't hit all of that as I should have, or Councillor Steinhoff-Gray if there's a follow-up as well.
I'll get to you in just a minute, but I want to highlight our director's answer in that staff and council have identified the overcommitment of water in the Tiverton system. Lisa and Andrew have commented, it's not going to come on today or tomorrow. It's time. So we do have time on our side. So the path forward to determine the source of the water is, in my mind, substantially more important than the cost at this point, because if there's a 10-year window, there will be opportunities to continue to apply. And if we don't get there, well, there's quicker and ways to connect than just building an extension to the Kincardine water treatment plant. Anyway, so Councillor, we'll go back and forth a little bit. Councillor Stewart, go ahead.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I do. Are you okay? Okay. I can release and let you talk. I'll release it and let my fellow councillor continue on.
Sorry, I'm just frustrated because it is a direct follow-up to what Adam just said. So it's frustrating. I'm going on record saying it's frustrating when you derail the train of thought. Sorry, Adam, my question related to what you just said is there, can you confirm whether or not we have another grant opportunity? I know before they called the election, they had said there was going to be another funding stream for water that would be open to us. Because I'm just being honest. I know we just said we've got a 10-year period, but if we could hit overage by 2029, that's really only 4 years from now. We're already in 2025. So I don't want to talk about 10-year periods in time. But my decision on this, given it's a $2 million differential and who's going to bear the cost of it, whether it's Ward 3 versus spread out across the entire community, that $2 million I care about. So I would like to understand the likelihood of another grant before I make a decision on which source of water we want.
Okay, and through you, Mayor Craig, you're accurate in that the province did release at, I believe at the Roma conference, information on a grant stream that would align with a project around water systems. We had received information not long after that and after the provincial election notice came forward that program was put on hold. So at this time, I'm not aware of any funding streams that are available that are open for application, and we'd be waiting for, hoping for post-election results that there will be some opportunity and avenue. One thing I will share, and I don't know how significant this is, but one of the feedback comments we did receive after the first application, where we did score poorly in the review, related to project readiness. And so with anything, it's vital that we continue to push these projects forward through both the EA process and eventually a decision, and realistically through a design. Those are things that are certainly weighted through the review at the provincial and federal levels.
So what I'm hearing is this decision would help us get the grant if they reopen the funding.
Through you, Mayor Craig, what I would say is that it won't hurt us being further along in the process. I think those are components that they, strongly consider.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I have quite a few questions. This has a huge impact on the community of Inver-Huron and very little benefit, actually. You're putting a huge concrete block bunker along with a diesel generator that will disrupt the community. So I'm finding this is a little bit premature with us approving one way or the other without actually getting input from the Inver-Huron community. I mean, we did an open house on October 30th. Everyone goes home on Thanksgiving. We could have this thing already built, designed, and anything before they come back in May. So we need to slow down and ask the Inver-Huron committee or the community whether they want to even have this bunker, because they might push back and this might change the whole thing. Trying to understand cost. How can you do something without understanding cost? I mean, you're putting in a booster station for 2.2 million, the new water meter at a main line at 2.6. Who's paying for that? Who is actually paying for that? That's new capital. That should go on to the users of Tiverton, I believe. I don't hear anything. I need to understand who's paying for this and how's their impact. And, a couple of things. I mean, I see in the applications, we had a cost of 6.9 million. I look here and we have a cost of 5.4 million. But I really do think, what are we planning to do? Put a line up County Road 15? Are you planning to hook up everyone along County Road 15? I don't see that in the offer. I think this is premature. I disagree with you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I do disagree. We shouldn't be, we're trying to get a cart before a horse. This is the problem we did with the business plan in 921. We sat ahead, we said, oh my God, we have almost 300 new housing projects. I have not seen any building permits issued. I've not seen any digging going on. These things might not happen. And it would change our mind if they don't happen. Right now in Tiverton, I believe in the existing system, we still have 160 slots that we could use. So what is the imperative to go right now on this? We have an EA that's good for 10 years. We need to make sure that the Tiverton folks have some say in the matter. We need to figure out, it's going to cost them money, and it could cost them about $10,000 if this is all perceived as new capital. And I'm not sure who can answer that question right now. But I see that we're trying to get the cart before the horse again. And when the staff is trying to push us, we should defer this until we get full details, until we get the feedback from both communities, Tiverton and Inver-Huron. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Craig, I can respond to those if you like.
Yes, go ahead, Director.
Okay, thank you. So a couple elements to that. One, we are following a provincially laid out and legislated environmental assessment process. It is quite standard to take a look at the problem, which is not only growth. So if we separate and really peel the onion back here, we've got an issue with the existing well system that is going to need to be addressed. In order to make good informed decisions, we've undertaken the environmental assessment process to understand what are the options in terms of solutions to address that. And then we add in the layer of, okay, what else do we need in terms of growth opportunities if they ever happen, and how would we support that? So not just building for today, but building for tomorrow if tomorrow came, but also just addressing the existing infrastructure. So that's really all baked into the environmental assessment process, which in reality is conducted and done so we can undertake a public engagement process, so we can provide council with detailed solution opportunities, and then essentially pick a solution and then go deeper into it so that way council can make more informed decisions as that process moves along. I certainly understand Councillor Stewart's comments around the impacts of the park and Inver Huron. We've engaged folks that are involved with the park, that are working on a park rehabilitation plan to understand what their vision is, as well as how we can align their vision with mitigation, I guess, in a sense, in terms of location and placement of a possible booster station if connection to the Kincardine system was the selected source. Ultimately, if it's not, we know that we're going to need to replace our well systems in Tiverton, but then additional to that, we're going to need to look outside the existing network to be able to ultimately provide the total quantity in terms of supply volume as we look out in our master planning vision of what's needed fully. So I respect the comments, but I do think that it is a fairly regimented process. I think, all of the details are well laid out within the EA report, and really give council the vital tools that they need to be able to make a decision on what is the source of the water supply for Tiverton going forward. And then from there, we can take that further once that's selected through this EA process, and within the recommendation, and then closing out this report to then further dive into the detailed engineering, firming up costs, and then assessing what is growth related, what is attributed to the existing ratepayers. Is that solely on the Tiverton system, or is it part of the, I'll call it the merged system, where we merged all of our water systems under one funding stream, or one source of funding in terms of a rate system back in the early 2020s. So.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. A common question and then a comment. The first comment is I don't envy being a councillor in Wards 2 or Ward 3, because no matter what decision you're going to make, you're in a small community, you know everybody, and you're going to hear about it no matter what. My question is, it relates to Councillor Stewart's comment about the location of the booster pumping station. I don't know if we were involved, just use as a comparison. When the municipal class environmental assessment was done for the Bruce supply water to Bruce Power, there was an issue during it about the location of the booster pumping station. In relation to this environmental assessment, are we already past the point in which the decision was made as far as where to put a booster pumping station for Bruce Power, or is that still yet to come? That's my question. Then I have a comment.
Sorry, just to clarify, are you speaking specifically about the Bruce Power?
Like in relation to, if we compare the Bruce Power, where they, based on input from the public, there was a change made to the location of the booster pumping station. It's going to go down at the corner of Concession 5 and the Beeline. So my question is now, if I compare the Tiverton supply to this one in the phases of the environmental assessment, are we past where I'm not using my words well, but I think you know where I can go and help me.
I think where you're going.
Yeah.
So no. So we're still in the draft phase, and we're looking for direction to move forward to get this to the Ministry of Environment to review, and then after that it goes out again for public review. So then the public would once again have another opportunity to provide comment, and if there was major concerns raised then, then that gets looked at that point.
Thank you. I'm envisioning, I was here at the MAC for the Bruce Power Environmental Assessment, looking at the panels with a number of members of the public while there was a discussion about where the booster pumping station was. So what I'm hearing is we have not passed that milestone. That's good to hear.
And we did have a public meeting with the boards and all that.
Yeah.
That was back in October.
Okay, now my comment is kind of, and this is a tough question to ask. It's about Tiverton. Regardless of, I don't think this is, ultimately it would be about who will finance what. But I think at the central, at the core of this is, what does Tiverton want to be? What it is and nothing more? Or does it want to be more? Thank you.
Councillor Pranger, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. When it comes to financing, I just, maybe our council members can think about it this way and tell me if I'm wrong. But, excuse me, infrastructure updates we've done to, say, the water systems here in Kincardine, they're paid
Through reserve.
through reserves, but which are funded through our tax base, which goes to everyone. So therefore, Tiverton residents have paid for Kincardine water updates. I don't understand why this would be different. Why would we put it all on Tiverton residents when I think as a community, we all share all costs? I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong, please.
Director, would you like to respond to that, please?
So through you, Mayor Craig, at this point, that is one item that I think is somewhat premature to really commit or overly comment to. I think what I would at least be comfortable with is saying that, you know, as we would look at whichever option is deemed or determined to be the preferred solution to the environmental assessment, we would take a look at that as being one of the alternatives that could be weighted and considered as a funding opportunity. In addition to grant streams, as well as you know, there being a capital levy consideration as well. It's not unheard of for large projects like this where there is a capital levy assessed to the primary beneficiaries as well. So I think it would, all I would say for now that I'd be comfortable with from a staffing lens is that that would be an item we would look at, and then we would give council, you know, that plethora of options that they could then further decide how they want to fund it.
Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, thank you very much for the detailed presentation. There's a lot of wonderful information here. I think I'm going to set aside that who pays for what question for later on in the assessment. And just kind of looking, and if I can, as sort of my pseudo question, confirm these answers. So the figure provided was 10.8 million for the 3 wells. And there was also the option to do, you know, a rehab plus 1 new well at about 7.1 million, and then the other 3.7 would come down the line if growth occurred. So if you use that 7.1 million and you compare it against the 5.4 plus HST, which works out to about 6.1, the option of going with the booster station is like 44% more affordable. After the big picture, like once you look at all 3 wells, and even if you just factor in the refurb plus 1 new well to meet like the short-term forecasted need, it's still 14% cheaper. So I think setting aside like letting Ward 1 or Ward 2 and Ward 3 sort of have their, you know, my mom and dad are fighting moment, I would say that I would be leaning towards supporting the recommendation to go with a booster pumping station because it is the most affordable option. Something has to happen, and if something has to happen, we should pick the most reasonable.
Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. And perhaps echoing some of my colleagues, thank you for the presentation. It's been extremely informative. And the discussion that has been had around the council table has been informative with meritorious questions being asked and concerns being raised. I have to say that for the purposes of this evening, it would seem that we really have to consider what the next step is. It appears to me that the notice of expansion perhaps provides that answer. It allows us to have that public review. It seems quite clear that legislatively that's going to be required. So for my purposes, we need to move forward on this, and it doesn't take away from the opportunity. In fact, it gives the opportunity to the public to have their say, and I have no doubt that they will take that opportunity to do so. But I don't know that we need to be overly bogged down this evening with regards to a lot of the questions, which I predicate my response on. They are valid questions, but I think if we focus on what we're being asked to do tonight, I hear what my colleague, Councillor Kavanagh states, and while I can support that, I'm certainly wanting to move this matter forward.
Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I did have one question, and one other question outstanding. There was a line in that you included about 1,000 kPa at the BPS. Oh, I got an echo. Okay. Anyways, it was saying due to the elevation rise from Inver Huron to Tiverton and given the need to be able to fill the existing Tiverton sandpipe, a pressure at approximately 1,000 kPa at the BPS would be required. However, the maximum pressure for that system is not to be beyond 700 kPa. So I was just curious what that means for us, how that all pans out.
Yeah, I can speak to that. The guidance around the 700 kPa as a normal maximum in your system, that's 100 psi for those that prefer those units, and that comes from the Ministry of Environment guidelines on water systems. So in just a normal system without any kind of consideration for reducing pressure, that'd be the maximum you want to provide water at without having concern for blowing apart people's plumbing, that kind of thing. Technically speaking, it's not a problem to design infrastructure to provide it at that 1,000 kPa to start. What it means is that if that alternative moved forward for the first approximately 2 kilometers of that water main distance, if there were any customers connected within that range, they'd want to have pressure reducing devices internal to their building and avoid that risk of damaging equipment. To add a little bit, that 1,000 kPa starting point is really all about filling the standpipe in Tiverton as it is right now, and really unaffecting the pressures that customers experience right now in the system.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. I'm still not convinced this is the right move at this particular time. Part of the EA structure says 30 days with the ministry. What do you have to present to the ministry? Is it a design plan, or do you just tell them the EA is on? And then again, 30 days for public appeal. That's unfair to a lot of the Lakeshore people. You know, that appeal could be in March or April. Is there any way that we can delay that? There's no immediate need for this, to allow people to make comments on this, because I'm going to hear it with both ears about having a bunker on the, the parkland. And, there is other properties that you could put it on, but you don't even seem to have looked at that. We own property a little bit north of Albert Street that right now we're thinking of selling, that's vacant. That wouldn't disturb the parkland and would be quite tucked into the trees. And that might be the alternative. Like my fellow councillor said, when we were looking at Bruce Power, they were planning to put a bunker right into a nice community, and we actually moved it. And that worked well for the whole community. Where's the win-win here if we don't have the community supporting this? I mean, I think that we're going to find that there's going to be a capital cost piece for all the residents in Tiverton that is going to be a little shocking, because everyone talks about all this development and development charges will pay for it. But this is like 921. If those 279 houses don't get built, what are we going to do? Have a stranded debt? So, a lot of this stuff needs to be discussed. Yes, you can move ahead, but, since you're going to just move ahead, it doesn't cost us anything to move ahead to an EA with the ministry. But that's all we should be doing until we get real good input from both communities.
So there was a text received from our director who suggested that we provide clarity in the motion regarding the, this is an option, but the option of the placement of the booster pump is for future discussion so that the broader community can have opportunity to address that. So, Councillor Stanoff, Gray, please.
Thank you to you, Chair. And actually, I'm going to thank Councillor Kavanaugh because I definitely misread the 3.6 plus. I thought it was 3.6 versus the 5.4. So based on that clarification, I understand now that the alternative suggested is the more cost-effective one. So I missed that, and I'm owning that in my comments now. But I would ask a question: if Councillor Stewart's suggestion of Albert Street did happen, is there any impact? Because you attached stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessments that are done, and I feel like that would result in us having to redo that if the location of the booster station was moved, and I'd just like to clarify.
Yeah, so considering of a alternative site for the booster pumping station could involve additional archaeological work. I pretty well guarantee it in Inver-Huron, as well as potential biological work, depending on what is at that other site, would all delay the EA process, and we wouldn't be able to move forward submitting the EA to the ministry for review until those were done.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Yes, and another decision that we haven't made in, as we put this, if it does go ahead and we put the pipeline up along 15, what is our commitment to all those residents? There's got to be 20 to 25 residents. I don't see anything in your report.
Nope, because that is a decision that council can make in the future. And it really doesn't change the EA one way or the other than if you go with the groundwater system, those people that live along 15 wouldn't be serviced.
Director, you still on the line with us?
Yes, I am, Mayor Craig.
Would you like to make a recommendation about how we could word this motion to clarify the opportunity for community input into its positioning?
Yeah, just give me 2 seconds here. Okay, so through you, Mayor Craig, I just took a quick peek back at the motion as it was crafted within the report. And so it currently states that council directs staff to issue the notice of expansion of the Tiverton Water Supply System Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, Environmental Study Report, ESR, for public review. So the intent of that is to really engage and allow the public within those periods of what that opening is, provide comment, but recognizing Councillor Stewart's comment around things and where we're sitting in the time of year. Realistically, we would be looking at March if this went out, and then an appeal period through the month of April, recognizing, a number of people start returning in the month of May. If council is open and looking for that to be a vital component of this, we essentially could extend the motion and state for public review, and that we, I think we could just state it that the actual process doesn't start till a certain period, so that we wouldn't actually initiate that review or public review and then trigger the dates with the ministry. We could identify that being, instead of like start of March, we could say April 1st or May 1st or something like that, if that would satisfy council, if we inserted a date within that to start that kind of public process.
Councillor Stewart, if there was going to be a day to start public review, it would be the start of which month?
I could see starting May. There has to be some free, but I can do that with the Huron District Ratepayer Association. So they get the copy, but I think at least May, they could come up at the May long weekend, and we would have to have a meeting on the long weekend. That's one of the things, is because, you know, they only come up Fridays to Mondays. So we have to take into some consideration. We talk about inclusivity. We're going to have to be inclusive. Thank you.
So we could make that amendment to the motion for public review beginning May 1st as a friendly amendment. Councillor Pranger, please.
Thank you.
I just have a multi-tiered question for clarification before we do this. I believe for PM Ross. On the process, what I heard was that, and maybe I'm wrong, there's a lot going on, was that it actually goes to the ministry first and then public consultation? And that's my first part of my question. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, that's correct. So we send it to the Ministry of Environment first for review and get their review out of the way, and then go to the public after that.
Thank you. So what else I heard you say was that if we were going to explore the option of a different location for the pumping station, we'd need to do that before it goes to the ministry, which means we need input and decisions from council as to whether we want that explored or not before we even move forward with this part.
That's correct.
So what would that entail? Permission to clarify that you will continue conversations with our municipal staff to identify options for placement of the booster pumping station?
So it would involve looking at with staff other sites and
Yep.
then determining what other studies might be required to determine if those sites are appropriate or not. And
Councillor Steinoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. There's actually one other question that I forgot to ask because I thought it was just an interesting one-liner. Because I knew we made it through the other assessments, but species at risk, it said that we had 32 birds confirmed in the area where we were focusing on that would be considered species at risk, and an additional like 49 that would 11 would have possible breeding status in the area. And I know that study refers to a 2009 bird study. I don't know that we've done a newer one. Is there any newer data available? Because I wouldn't want to disrupt an at-risk species.
yeah, so that's based on the Ontario Bird Atlas for their 10-kilometer squares that they use to assess potential habitat. But that's the latest data that they have available.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I like what I'm hearing here, a little more flexibility than just the straight report we were reading. I need two things, actually, before I bring it to the community in Huron, and I think they're fairly easy things to do. I need to know the noise level of a diesel generator. You know, because with the diesel generator, in the middle of the night on a nice warm night, it kicks in and, you know, it goes 24/7. So I need to know the noise level, and maybe you can point out a diesel generator to me that would be similar to what we're looking at around here so I can tell people. And if you could give me conceptual drawings of the bunker or of the thing, not flat, what one might look like, because that park is quite large. And, you know, you're only looking at the open spaces. Maybe we can tuck it into the trees and maybe so we need some flexibility, but I need some tools so I can take it back to the community to see, because that would be a win-win if they could agree with that, and then we don't have to change the EA at all. Thank you.
Councillor Inchberger, please.
Thank you. I should have read more, but wouldn't this idea of a diesel powered pump only be under an emergency when the normal electrical driven pump would be unpowered, which would be a very infrequent thing? Okay, I just started to wonder whether some of us were thinking that the main operating booster pump was going to be a diesel generator. I didn't think.
It
Okay,
would run off the grid until there was an interruption in service.
thank you.
Okay, so we have who moved this? Stanoff, Gray, and Prenger. The council directs staff to issue the notice of expansion of the Tiverton Water Supply System Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, Environmental Study Report for public review beginning 1st of May. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Andrew and Lisa, thank you so much for your presentation this evening.
Thank you for the patience. Good job.
Right, moving on to Huron Shores ATV Club agreement. We need a mover and seconder that council pass a bylaw to enter into an agreement with the Huron Shores ATV Club to allow access to an unopened road allowance between concession 9, concession 11 on side road 30, Kincardine Township, per report operations 2025-04, moved by councillors Kavanaugh and Prenger. Oh my gosh, you're on a roll this evening. Any discussion? Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much. Just a thank you to the staff for the incredible turnaround on time on this. Tyler Johnson delegated on the 8th of January, and less than 2 months later, council is able to pass this bylaw and enter into the agreement. So thank you to our staff.
All in favor? And that's carried. Municipal accommodation tax consideration. And we have our staff manager here this evening, Lori Fusey. We need a mover and seconder that whereas the municipal accommodation tax is a revenue tool commonly used by Ontario municipalities to fund tourism activities and general municipal revenues, and whereas the municipality of Kincardine is an iconic tourism destination, Ontario. Now therefore be it resolved that staff report strategic initiatives 2025-03 municipal accommodation tax consideration proposed process be received, and further the council directs staff to implement the proposed process as outlined in this report and report back to council each quarter with an update. Councillors Williams and Stanoff Gray. Conversation? Do you like to report on this, manager?
Through you, Mayor Craig, if I might just say a couple of comments, just because this initiative is new to the community, I just thought to set the context and for the public record. So may I do that, Mayor? I know it's been a long night, so. Just to kind of give the context that the MAT was introduced in 2017 as a tool for municipalities to generate additional revenue for tourism-related activities and projects. It's levied on visitors who stay in short-term and overnight accommodations within the municipality. And right now, like this is probably old stats because as I look into this more and more municipalities are joining in. It seems like it's a win-win situation. And so right now, approximately 50 out of the 444 municipalities have implemented a MAT across their municipality. And some examples are South Bruce Peninsula, Town of Blue Mountains, Midland, Barrie, Aurelia, Niagara Falls, Toronto, etc. Just to name a few. So why are municipalities implementing a MAT? And I think the obvious reason is that it is a revenue source, and it also is a revenue source to help pay for existing facilities and programs and services that lessens the burden on our taxpayers. And so MAT revenues can really be used to provide funding for new facilities, programs, services, things like parks, beaches, trails, anything that benefits visitors, but also obviously benefits our residents. So where does the MAT apply? Really, the municipality determines what types of accommodation providers that the tax would apply to. Some, start with just hotels, the big accommodators. Others look at short-term rentals. And so really, this is up to council to decide where to go with this. But in general terms, it's for, accommodations of stays of less than 30 days. And really, regulations under the Municipal Act do not define transient accommodation, which provides the municipality with some flexibility there if we want to include that or not to include that. But there are some exemptions. You can't include hospital stays and post-secondary kind of dorms, shelters, treatment centers, etc. So there are some exceptions to the rule. And so as I mentioned on the previous slide, which I think are up there. Great. Thank you, Nicole. I didn't even notice that. Regulations don't define the transient accommodation, but council can determine where it applies to. And that really includes, like, there's lots of options there around commercial accommodators, hotels, motels, short-term like cottage rentals, transitory housing like lodging, rooming house, bed and breakfast, campgrounds, marinas, etc. So there are some options there for council to consider. And really, again, the 50% goes to the municipality for the types of things I had mentioned before. And then 50% is distributed to a non-for-profit eligible tourism entity and used exclusively to promote tourism in the area. So the tax is directed, half of it is to be directed towards that. And then, you know, when you might ask then, what is a eligible tourism entity? And it's a nonprofit whose mandate is to promote tourism in Ontario and within the municipality. And the municipality needs to enter into an agreement with this eligible tourism entity that receives that portion of the MAT tax. And one of the things is we do not have that entity in our community. Other communities like Town of Blue Mountains did have that entity, so it was a bit of an easier go. We don't have that entity, so that will be part of the process to establish that that structure and all of the accountabilities, et cetera, that would need to go towards that. So once if the MAT's sort of implemented and approved, it becomes a mandatory fee, and that basically we can then the council can decide how we're going to directly collect and administer those fees. And there's various options there, which we would come back to council and explore those options. Come back to council with those options for council to make a decision in the future. The other thing is council needs to decide if short-term accommodations are part of the MAT. I've been doing lots of consultations with different municipalities, having conversations around STAs, short-term accommodations. And really the big thing that people say is that it is the critical factor for implementing a MAT. It actually makes it more successful. And so I should also mention, you know, along with the complaints, that's one of the reasons why municipalities like to deal with licensing for STAs, but there are also benefits of having short-term accommodations. And, you know, they are a source of income for property owners. They provide accommodations for visitors, and visitors help support the local economy. So there are challenges and benefits of short-term accommodations. We have them already in our community. The licensing will help provide us some benefits that ensure that our short-term rentals are operated in a safe and legal manner. It also ensures that the accommodations comply with the Ontario Building Code. And then it ensures that rentals located within neighborhoods don't impact neighboring, property neighbors kind of thing. So then the other benefit of licensing short-term accommodations, that it helps the municipality understand the housing supply. And so what's dedicated to short-term rentals versus, supply to the housing market. So that'll be part of the part of the process that we're going to need to look at as we're moving, if should council wish to include short-term accommodations. And so I put some notes in the report, plus a table that looks a little bit different than it did when it went online than my copy here. But the thing is that some of the next steps to move us forward is really the one thing I wanted to mention is that I did talk with municipalities, and they did talk about licensing the short-term accommodation. That does take work. And so part of the process would be communications and engagement around the short-term licensing. But basically that first step is looking at that forecast of revenues so that we can understand how many short-term accommodations we have, give council a really good picture of the potential revenues and the economic impact. And then so that we understand how much revenue would be coming from the MAT tax. And so should council, council will need to decide that piece. And if it decides to move ahead, then we would be looking at some work to how, like, for the licensing of a short-term accommodation. And that includes zoning bylaw, looking at things like demerit point systems, capacity, occupancy capacities, how many we want in the community, short-term accommodations. You can set a cap around that. Setting up the permitting process. There's a whole bunch of work that needs to happen, which impacts the whole organization. And there are ways of mitigating some of the pressures on that, but definitely it does have work to complete. And so part of the work would be, if council wishes to look at short-term accommodations, the process would be, now start that work, the financial impact, get that going quickly, and then hopefully have everything in place so that way January 2026 would be the proposed timeline to start short-term accommodation licensing. And then the goal would be then to work on the MAT simultaneously, but have the MAT come in place by January 2027. And so it's, looking at other municipalities, they talked about it being anything from an 18-month process to about a 3.5-year process. And so this is kind of meeting us in the middle. But there are also lots of examples out there that maybe weren't there in past years for other municipalities. And so this is an estimated projection. So those are my comments around the MAT and also the implementation of a short-term licensing permitting process.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Stanoff-Gray, please.
You sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole because I was so excited about everything that you were saying. And you had mentioned we don't have a destination management organization, so that's one of our complications because of the 50%. But I'm curious if there's a set criteria for destination management organization. I actually did a really quick search and it says they promote marketing of a specific location. It's a destination development, visitor services. Are there things like the Scottish Festival or something that we could give seed money through? Our Blues Festival, which I believe are nonprofit in nature, but bring a lot of different people to our community. Would that be a mechanism for that 50% of funds to help fund some of those internal community events that we put on at no cost to the community? They basically donate back any exceedances. So is that something we could look at in that designation, or do we need a broader term?
Through you, Mayor, the Destination Management Organization is for broader tourism in the municipality of Kincardine. And you can set up, it has to be a nonprofit, so it could be an existing nonprofit that council would have a memorandum. So some examples, chambers of commerce have been chosen, although not recommended for a variety of reasons. And once we get to that stage, we can bring some of that information back. But it really is setting up a nonprofit. And so that has municipal council on it. It has the chamber. It has different tourism sectors on that body.
Councillor Pranger, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to understand what the zoning for this type of property would look like.
Through you, Mayor, that would be part of the process we would need to do. We need to identify that. And so definitely zoning, and Dwayne will be involved in all of that process. So.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And I'd like to thank the manager for her patience tonight and waiting around for us. Thanks again. If at all possible, I'd really like to implement this before the end of our term. I guess the question I would have is, if I look at your attachment to estimated MAT timelines document, what would it take in order to establish the destination management organization and implement the framework or developing the framework in parallel? In order that, because just for context, I look at the last item on that slide, implement the MAT in January 2027. That has hiring of staff. I personally, I don't want to leave anything for the next term of council. I'd like this to be in place and running before we depart. And so I guess my ask is, what would it take to run some of those things in parallel in order to achieve that?
Through you, Mayor, I think that's part of we can look at that. I was basing the estimate on previous municipalities, and we do have budget now approval, so we can look at timelines and see if we can expedite if that's council's wishes.
I'd like to know the options. Thank you. Sorry.
Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, through you. I have two questions. When we look at the timelines and the forecast of the revenues, I think in order to decide if we should license STAs, we also need to understand the costs related to the implementation and monitoring of the licenses, because an important part of this decision should be around, like the net revenue. So how much are we going to be able to retain as revenue after the costs associated with licenses? Because I imagine that is potentially going to be a significant cost. I suppose that was just a comment. And And then a question I would have around the DMO being established, and perhaps this is too premature, would we look at moving our current tourism function that operates within the municipality to the DMO?
Through you, Mayor, I think that's all part of the conversation. It typically wouldn't be within the municipality though, because it has to be a not-for-profit. So if we move that function, it needs to move the function to the nonprofit. So I'm assuming that tourism is going to move to the nonprofit. That's if we go this route.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, good job. Really good job. You're taking on a huge, huge project. And best of luck and everything else. I agree with my fellow councillor. It's hard if we implement it after this term. You never know what the next councillors will say, and I hope that they do say yes after all that work. But what I just wanted to ask, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity, great timing, because you got Wyerton and Tobermory, the South Bruce and North Bruce already done it for 2 or 3 years. So we can learn from it and everything else. Just the one question, I think we, through our budget thing, we gave you $75,000. What are you going to use that money for? Do you have any anticipation right now? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. So the very first, and we have them waiting, is doing our financial and economic impact. So that we will then do the financial forecasting, come back to council with an economic impact, and there will be numbers then as well. So part of that is getting a count of short-term accommodations. So coming back with what Councillor Williams was talking about, so that you know the full picture. So, so those are just a couple of the examples, but there definitely is work that needs to be done around development policy, the bylaw pieces, how to develop the permitting system. All of that stuff is all going to be part of some of the costs that we'll need to work on. So, yeah.
Councillor Stanoff Gray, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm really happy about this too. Thank you so much. I was just going to make one comment because last year when I was at OSUM, there was a number of groups that talked about their short-term accommodation taxes, and Blue Mountain actually seems to be having a really successful program with revenue, but one of the more important things is that it helped ensure standards for the community based on the ongoings of the short-term accommodation. So most people were less concerned about fines, for instance, for as much as the demerit points, because if you had too many demerit points, you'd lose your short-term accommodation license. So it really encouraged good stewardship of the people that are in those houses living in the residential communities. So I think that's a really important thing to look at. And part of how they ended up maintaining it is if someone was called out for a false fire alarm, or someone was called out by police, or bylaw was called out, they'd ask to see the permit. And if there was no permit, they actually, I believe, I'd have to check, they either remove the permit, but I think they might even prevent that property from ever getting a license if you're caught. So it had a real meaningful, tangible impact. So I'm interested in that because I noticed in your report from 2022 that you included, you said there was 45 plus Airbnbs that were noted. Did you get that information just going on Airbnb, or did Airbnb provide it to you? Because I saw over 600 plus when I looked recently, so that would seem like it exploded in just a short number of time. So I'm curious.
Through you, Mayor, that report was completed by Roxana Bowman in 2022. One of the things that I heard loud and clearly too was to get a company that actually knows how to scrape the system to figure out what short-term accommodations are out there. And so staff doing it or even going on VRBO or Airbnb isn't enough. And so that's part of what are the services we'll be looking at to see how many there actually is. So.
Councillor Pranger, please.
Thank you, through the chair. Just more of a comment. I'd like to commend Manager Ferozy and whoever you had help you with this report. It was something council through its staff and asked to have it presented to us, and it's more to the level of detail that I would expect to see. I think it was really well done, and it's probably the closest thing to like a full scope of work for a project that I've seen presented to us. I just think you did a great job. Thank you. It's high level, but it's what we needed at this point. Thank you.
So I'd like to tag on to a bit of Councillor Stanoff Gray's comments, and I think one of the key factors for me is like, why are we doing this? Because if it's just about money, in the municipal coffers, then we head down this path. If it's about quality of life, it's a different path. If it's about funding tourism, it's somewhere. So I'm not sure whether there is a requirement from your park manager to, get a piece in and say, okay, well, we're this far, we've discovered this much, but why are we doing this? So I'm not sure if council thinks that's an important question, but it's like it would certainly help you focus on don't worry about the enforcement if you're just worried about the money, because that just costs you stuff to keep people out on the road. So there's that question that's tagged along. So anyway, we have the motion on the floor. We direct staff to implement the proposed process as outlined and report back to council each quarter with an update. All in favor? And that's anyone opposed? That's carried. Good. Tiverton Sports Center Dasher Board Replacement Contract Award. We need a mover and seconder. The council award the contract to replace the Dasher boards and glass at the Tiverton Sports Center to Athletica Sports Systems Incorporated in the amount of $303,390 exclusive of HST, moved by councillors Stewart and Inchberger. Any discussion? All in favor? Tiverton Sports Center Refrigeration Plant Contract Award. We need a mover and seconder that council awards the contract to replace the refrigeration plant at the Tiverton Sports Center to Simcoe Refrigeration for the bid price of $549,785, excluding HST, moved by councillors Williams and Deputy Mayor Clark. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Well presented, Mike. You did a great job explaining that. So
I hope you're here more than just
no, I don't think so. All right, consideration of bylaws. We need a mover and seconder that the 2025 budget bylaw be deemed to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed and numbered as bylaw number 2025-023, moved by Councillor Steinhoff, Gray, and Deputy Mayor Clark. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you for recognizing me. Through you, unless we split this, I'll have to vote no overall, but because we had capital and then we had operations. So I don't know how you want to proceed with this, but if you're going to just do it under one, I'd like a recorded vote, please.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So after making a decision, I usually always go over the logic I used to get me there. So after Monday's budget meeting, I went back and I watched the YouTube video of the October 9th, 2024 council meeting in which we reviewed the 2025 budget plan report. At that meeting, council was asked to provide direction on the maximum 2025 rate increase to support the tax-supported operating budget, inclusive of adding a 3% increase to satisfy the asset management funding requirements. After hearing councillors provide their individual thoughts on a maximum rate increase, which ran from 6 to 8%, with one member of council willing to go as high as 9.99, the mayor asked for a show of hands as to whether there was a consensus for a range of 7 to 8%. Every member of council here agreed, with the exception of Councillor Williams, who hadn't joined us yet. The bylaw before us tonight contains a rate increase of 7.13%. Not only was this achieved without sacrificing the 3% increase to support asset management funding requirement, which was what we did in 2024, but it was also achieved without drawing on the Bruce Telecom Legacy Fund in a manner similar to last year when we applied $250,000 to the operating budget. Had those measures both been applied when determining the 2025 operating budget, the resulting rate increase would have been roughly 3%. For comparison, the average rate of inflation in Canada in 2024 was 2.4. From my perspective, the 2025 budget is a good compromise between maintaining existing levels of service, putting aside enough to finance future capital rehabilitation and replacement to continue to provide that service while minimizing adding any extra costs. So I'd like to understand a little better, particularly from those who voted no on the budget on Monday, what has changed materially since October 9th?
It's like to know I'm making a good decision with all the information available, so.
Okay, well, if there's responses, you can offer them, or if not, we can just go to the recorded vote that's been requested. Councillor Williams, please.
Sure, thank you through you. I appreciate that I was not present during the October discussion, but I can certainly tell you some of the things that have been going through my head over the last couple of weeks as we've been reviewing and discussing the operating budget in particular. The reasons that I voted against approval of the operating budget on Monday was because I found it difficult to support something that I felt did put too much of a burden on the ratepayer, when during the discussions we did have an opportunity to reduce the amount through a couple of ideas that were proposed on the TOP board at the time that I thought were quite reasonable, but we chose not to. I completely appreciate that contributing 3% to the asset management is absolutely critical to expand our capital investment capacity. But to Councillor Hinchberger's point, around inflation being around 2.5, 2.6%, I did feel that having like a 4% operating budget increase just wasn't acceptable, as this is also in addition to an 8% increase on the water bill. And so from my perspective, I did feel like it was too much of a burden to put on an already taxed ratepayers, especially when there was an opportunity or the ability to provide a little bit more relief during this budget.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. And through you, I fully agree with my fellow councillor. Through the discussions, I felt that there was some lost opportunity to trim it right down. And, you know, as I get more and more involved with budgets and budget discussions and talking to the community, we're actually pushing the community pretty hard and trying to keep the same level of services. But, you know, 24% of our community is on basically fixed income. You know, they have pension plans and they don't get an increase like we. Bruce Power only got a 2.5% increase. So when I started to find out all this information, of course, I'm going to change my mind. And I think that still I cannot fair go approve this budget. I think it's just too high. I mean, our budget with our neighbors is a lot lower, you know, and here in Kinloss, I mean, they came in less than 5. So, you know, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to figure out how to do our business here with the level of services we want at much more affordable levels. Thank you.
Clerk, please.
Okay, Stewart,
No. Sorry, no.
Williams,
No.
Steinhoff Gray,
Yes.
Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Clark,
Yes.
Hinchberger,
Yes.
Pranger,
Yes.
and Craig.
Yes.
It's carried.
All right, so we need a mover and seconder that the following bylaws are hereby read a first, second, third time, finally passed 26th of February 2025. Huron Shores ATV Club Agreement, award the Tiverton Sports Center refrigeration plan, award the Tiverton Sports Center dasher board and glass contract bylaw, moved by councillors Kavanaugh and Deputy Mayor Clark. All in favor? And that's carried. The consent agenda. Once again, items listed under the consent agenda are enacted in one motion. Exception is any items that any member would like withdrawn this evening or for a future report for comment or consideration. Councillor Steinhoff Gray, please.
Thank you to you, Chair. I'd like to call on item 8.1 Bravo Delta, so the 2024 Phragmites control program update. I know that when I was going through Ward 3, this was a big program that people were concerned about with the waterfront and the impact. I don't necessarily need it pulled back. I just had a quick question for the director, who I believe is still behind me. And that was just, is the level of support that we have appropriate to what we're seeing as an issue? Because I know in the report you said that continued support for the program is important. I just kind of want to level set if our current support level meets the margins for what we need to do to keep that invasive species under control.
Thank you for the question. And through you, Mr. Mayor, we've had numerous discussions about this, and we are pleased to hear from Janice Gilbert, who has been working with the municipality since I think 2015, that we've made headwaves and that we are a true model in the province for remediation of Phragmites. And so if we continue along this journey, which we are doing, she has seen a tremendous amount of headwaves within the municipality where we're no longer taking out the large impacts of Phragmites, but we're focusing on the smaller patches, which proves that what we've done has been effective and that we should continue the journey that we've been doing.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you. Is Adam still on?
He is not.
Okay, no problem.
I am here.
Thank you. 8.1BA, Bruce Power Water Supply Capital Project Review. Adam, just to ask you a question. I was trying to figure out, because timing seems to be extended a little bit. We're on phase 2 now, aren't we? Are we, that's basically upgrading the treatment plant, and you'll be going out for bids on that with Bruce Power. Is that correct? And you're hoping to have that finished in 25?
So through you, Mayor Craig, correct in phase 2. Phase 3 is triggered by the award of a contract through a tender. We're hoping here, let's say within the first quarter of this year, to be ready to tender the 3 different contracts that would come with this, and then we would commence construction at some point through this fiscal year on the pipeline, the booster station, and then components related to the treatment plant upgrades.
So you're doing all 3 all at once. Okay, great news.
Deputy Mayor Clark, please.
8.1BE, I was pleased to see that Community Service, our Director of Community Services is working with Jumpstart and that they are working on a memorandum of understanding, and I look forward to that coming before council. Well done.
And I have one 8.1BB, which is the mayor's report, and I was remiss in not including Councillor Blackwell as one of the delegates that attended as well. So my apologies to her because she was a candidate or a delegate as well. Okay, so we need a mover and seconder. The council approved the recommendations contained in the consent agenda dated February 26 and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions. Moved by councillors Deputy Mayor Clark and Hinchberger. All in favor? And that's carried. Member of Council General announcements. Councillor Hinchberger.
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing to add tonight.
Councillor Prenger.
Nothing tonight.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. Just like to thank the Agricultural Society and the Lions Club in Tiverton. We had a very successful Winterfest, and I'm sorry that I guess the Monday didn't really work for the King Card. It was closed on Family Day. Yeah, but anyways, just like to thank all the participants and everything, and we'll be there next year. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Nothing.
Councillor Stanoff Gray.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think I'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the effort that our municipality staff have put in with snow removal. I understand from Jill there was over 250 truckloads full removed from the downtown of Kincardine alone. And if you travel down the 21 quarter, I don't even feel like I'm in Bruce County anymore with how high the mountains of snow are. And they were out there in really bad conditions, doing the best they can under less than pleasant circumstances. So I would like to acknowledge that and thank them for their service.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
I have no announcements this evening. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, please.
No announcements.
Okay, 3 actually. There's a BIA breakfast, March 5th. That's Wednesday next week, I think. at the Bruce Steakhouse, 8 o'clock in the morning. And you could likely get tickets from any member of the BIA board. Rory, board,
But I will be there as well.
right on. International Women's Day is at Ainsdale Golf Course the next evening, starts at 5 o'clock, recognizing the significant contribution and excellent work that the women in our community and around the world do. And also, yesterday we had opportunity to recognize Pat Stewart, who has been the coordinator at the Kincardine Food Bank for 25 years. She is retiring. She was the same color as Amanda's sweater when she was recognized, and it wasn't a big deal. A certificate from the municipality and a congratulatory letter. She has led and been part of that food bank through some significantly changing times. So well done, Ms. Stewart. No. Okay, so at this point, we need a mover and seconder. The council move into closed session pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act is amended for the purpose of considering. I'm going to stop that now. I'm going to ask for a mover that we, for the extend the automatic hour of adjournment till we're done tonight. By councillors Williams and Steinoff Gray, all in favor. That's carried. Okay, I need a mover and seconder. The council move into closed session pursuant to section 239 of the Municipal Act as amended for the purpose of considering the closed session minutes dated January 22nd this year. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees or potential appointees to a local board ad hoc committee or other municipality, specifically a physician recruitment agreement. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, specifically candidates for Heritage Kincardine. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, the Kincardine Family Health Organization medical office lease. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, specifically the CAO evaluation, and further that council return to regular open meeting upon completion. Moved by, did I get a mover? Oh, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Steinoff Gray. All in favor? Bio break.